women voters to bring waste crisis more front and center and develop impactful responses when the pandemic hit. The research we conducted in January highlighted not only some key opportunities for us to address, but a high level of awareness and support by the public. Just Google Northwest Cook County Group Sierra Club and contact us through our website and Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So now just a little bit of Zoom information. I think we're all becoming experts on Zoom, but anyway, we're all going to be automatically placed on mute. And if you have a question, please ask it in the chat box, which can be found at the bottom toolbar of your screen. Just click on it, type in your question, but we're going to save all the questions to the end under the Q&A portion. And please be respectful in the chat. No racist, sexist, homophobic, or otherwise derogatory content will be tolerated, and we will remove you from the meeting if those rules are violated. Now, on our speakers. We do have approval from our speakers to record their presentations, and those presentations will be added to our website, which will be listed on the last slide. We have about 90 minutes total, and each presenter will have about 20 minutes to present, and then leave about 20 minutes for a Q&A. And our presenters are Renee Blue and Jennifer Kainz with Mindful Waste. They're going to discuss food waste. Natalie Lichtenbert talking about single-use plastics, and Cindy Skrukrud who will address water pollution. So thank you all, and let's get started. For Renee and Jennifer.
Thank you. Bear with me a moment while I share my screen with you. Thanks to everyone for joining this evening. Okay, hopefully we're in business.
Yep, it looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you. So again, thank you for the introduction. I'm Renee Blue, and together Jennifer Kainz, who's also on this call, and I co-founded Mindful Waste. Our mission is to eliminate food waste through education, prevention, and recovery. We partner with schools and communities to teach waste reduction strategies and composting methods. And we're grateful to the Sierra Club and the League of Women Voters for inviting us to present this evening and to share solutions for closing the food loop in our homes and communities. So at the center of the issue of food waste, there's a terrible paradox, which is that 40% of food produced in the US is thrown away, while 1 in 6 families struggles to put food on the table. It's both heartbreaking and maddening to know that farmers produce enough food to feed 10 billion people, 1.5 times the current world population, yet over 820 million people worldwide, 1 in 9 faces hunger. Our industrial food system is very inefficient, creating food waste along the entire chain, from origin to consumer. Waste occurs everywhere, from farms and manufacturers to retail, schools, hospitals, and homes. So it's probably not a surprise, given those statistics, that food waste accounts for over 20% of the United States annual waste stream. In 2014 alone, more than 38 million tons of food waste was generated in the US. The EPA estimates that food constitutes 21.6% of discarded municipal solid waste, and that more food reaches landfills and incinerators than any other single material in our everyday trash. And Jennifer will explain why this is such a serious problem.
Thanks, Renee. So this diagram shows how food waste contributes to air, land, and water pollution. When food breaks down in a landfill, it lacks oxygen and it becomes anaerobic. This process then gives off methane, which is about 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And in addition to these greenhouse gases, the food waste in landfills produces leachate, which is the liquid that passes through the landfill and contains heavy metals and pathogens. This poses a serious threat to our health of the surface and our groundwater.
Apologies, for some reason I'm not able to forward my slide. Bear with me a moment here. Okay.
Okay, so food waste has an enormous economic and environmental impact. It accounts for 25% of our fresh water supply and the equivalent of 350 million gallons of oil. There are studies that indicate as much as 11% of greenhouse gas emissions could be eliminated if food waste were brought to zero. This is why reducing food waste is one of the most important things we can do to reverse global warming. And wasting food is, of course, a waste of money. In the US alone, $218 billion per year is spent growing, processing, and disposing of food that is never eaten. The average US household throws away about $1,500 a year worth of food, which I'm sure we all would prefer to spend elsewhere. So our goal is to help people understand and appreciate the value of food and all of the resources used to produce it. So in schools, we teach kids that wasting a carton of milk is the same as pouring 48 gallons of water down the drain. Every food item has a story. And when the kids begin to understand that the amount of water, labor, fuel, and money that is required to get a strawberry from the farm to the refrigerator, for example, they might be less likely to let it go to waste. And the USDA and the EPA have set a food waste reduction goal of 50% by 2030. And as Renee did mention, waste happens all along our inefficient food supply chain. And we are seeing this more than ever right now because of COVID-19, as billions of gallons of milk are being poured down the drain and farmers are forced to euthanize their livestock. And it's easy to point fingers, but the reality is that households produce most of the country's food waste, making up about 43%. So we all have to take part in reaching this goal. And Renee has some really great solutions that start in your very own kitchen.
Now, Jennifer and I know that we just gave you a whole lot of very sobering news, but the rest of our presentation will focus on some great news, which is that we all have the ability to reduce food waste within our households and communities, saving money and resources along the way. If we're responsible for 43% of the food waste that's happening, we're responsible for at least that much of the solution. So we have some tips for reducing food waste in your home environment. And one of our favorites is to inventory your pantry and plan meals around what you already have. I'm sure many of you were already doing this before, but with the coronavirus, we've all recently participated, unwillingly perhaps, in a master class on using what we already have. Another great tip is to clean your fridge regularly. Set a date to do it once a week, and move the products that need to be used first to the front. And some people even go as far as making "eat me first" and "use me" signs to remind household members of which foods are aging fast. Next, it's important to know your portion sizes and cook accordingly. If you can't or won't eat what a full recipe yields, modify it beforehand to avoid waste. Also, your freezer is your best friend. A great many foods can be preserved by freezing them, retaining their quality and taste. And it's a joy to find summer tomatoes or berries tucked away in your freezer on a cold winter day. It's always a treat. Mm-hmm. Menu planning is definitely your friend. And this one can be tough when our lives get super busy, but we're convinced that it's the single best way to prevent food waste at home. Planning lets you devise a week's worth of meals using common ingredients so nothing goes to waste. There are some chefs we love who focus on just this. Ends and Stems chef Allison Mountford does weekly menu planning. Cooking Scrappy's Joel Gamoran focuses on utilizing all ingredients. And the Zero Waste chef Anne-Marie Bonneau is full of unbelievably helpful tips. We highly recommend checking all three out. And lastly, but not least, follow your senses, not expiration dates. The only regulated expiration date is infant formula. Sell-by and best-by dates are manufacturers' quality recommendations and nothing more. The USDA's Food Keeper app is an excellent resource for food storage. And speaking of food storage, one of the best ways to extend the life of your food, especially your produce, is to ensure that you're storing it properly. We like to divide our produce into two main categories: ethylene emitters and particular produce. Ethylene emitters include melons, mangoes, bananas, tomatoes, avocados, peaches, cherries, apples, and pears. These should always be stored away from one another, as the ethylene they emit accelerates ripening. In particular, produce includes broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, bell peppers, all berries, leafy greens, cucumbers, radishes, peas, and squash. These veggies all love cold, humid storage conditions away from ethylene emitters. And be sure to leave them unwashed until you're ready to eat or prepare them. A couple other interesting tips are that apples and potatoes really love being stored near one another and will extend one another's lives. But potatoes and onions are unfortunately not good storage companions. And it can seem daunting at times to store food without plastic, but there are many great sustainable choices out there. For celery and carrots, we love to store them whole or cut in water to keep them crisp, and glass jars are ideal for this. For beans and peas, wrap them in a damp cloth to keep them snappy. Fresh herbs, just trim the stems and stand them in a glass or jar with a small amount of water, either on the counter or in the fridge. For fresh bread, store it in a cloth bread bag or in a wooden bread box. And some of our favorite food storage items are glass jars, stainless steel containers, which freeze really well and are great for on the go, and beeswax wraps, which are a fun project actually that you can easily make yourself. And silicone bags can be helpful too. We like to broaden the definition of food waste to also include all of the resources that are wasted in the process of transporting, processing, and packaging food. One of the very best ways to reduce this waste is to purchase food as close to its source as possible. The closest is, of course, your own backyard or container gardens. The second best would be a local farm or CSA, followed by a farmer's market. Supermarkets produce very significant amounts of food waste. Though this is improving due to legislation mandating food donation, it's still problematic. And food delivery services, while tempting for their ease of use, are tremendously costly from a resource consumption perspective. So the biggest problem that you can see with our current food supply chain is that it's linear. And Jennifer will explain why we need to move to a more circular system.
So this is what the food cycle should ideally look like in the perfect world. It's definitely not rocket science. It's how it happens in nature. An apple or leaf falls from the tree, decomposers break it down and return those nutrients back to the soil. And composting mimics this natural cycle and speeds it up. When we compost our food waste, we create healthy soil to grow more food, and the cycle continues. But sadly, only 3% of our food waste is currently being composted. And since 95% of our food depends on healthy soil, it is important. It's the most important component of our entire food system. But we are losing a lot of our topsoil due to modern farming practices. According to the UN's Food and Agricultural Organization, if we continue to degrade our soil at the rate we are now, the world could run out of topsoil in about 60 years. So it is critical to close this loop and get those nutrients back into the ground. Backyard composting is a great solution to the food waste problem. And all you really need is about 3 cubic feet of space. This is something you can do at zero cost. You just need carbon materials such as dried leaves or wood chips, and nitrogen, which is your food waste, minus the meat, dairy, and oils, or you can use grass clippings. There are many different types of containers on the market if you don't want an open compost pile. For example, insulated tumblers work really well in our climate. And if you live in an apartment or lack the backyard space, vermicomposting is a great option. It can be done indoors and in so many different types of containers. You do not have to purchase an expensive one. You can use an old Rubbermaid container or even an old dresser drawer. Red wigglers can eat up to their body weight every day. So if you start with 1 pound of worms, which is about 1,000, you can theoretically feed them 1 pound of scraps every single day. And you will soon start to find the weight of your garbage decreasing. So if you don't want to try your hand at backyard composting or vermicomposting, then commercial composting might be another option to look into. Some municipalities offer curbside food scrap recycling programs that coincide with the landscape season, but some offer it year-round. If you are local, Prairie Land Disposal allows for all organic waste to go into the yard waste bin. That includes meat, dairy, oils, and even kitty litter. They have a free drop-off site as well. And we are very fortunate to have Midwest Organics, which is a commercial composting facility right here near us in Wakanda, which makes it cost-effective to transport food waste there instead of a landfill. There are currently 6 states that have enacted food waste recycling laws on some level: New Jersey, California, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Rhode Island, and New York. And we are really, really hoping Illinois is next.
Jennifer and I both really appreciate you listening to our presentation and your interest in pollution solutions. We're looking forward to answering any questions you might have at the end of all 3 presentations. And these are our emails, and we welcome you reaching out by email with any questions as well. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. That was wonderful, Renee and Jennifer. Next, we're going to move to Natalie. Natalie Lichtenbert.
All right, so let's get started. So hey everybody, my name is Natalie Lynn and welcome to No Plastic Please. So just to give you a little background on my story, I'm an only child, and when I was younger, my parents and I traveled all over the United States, seeing our amazing national parks, both in the East and especially out West. An incident happened one day while we were at a rest stop. I just was so enthralled with the black-eyed Susans on the side of the road, and here I am, my dad snapped a picture. I was just about to grab one of the flowers. My dad sharply yelled at me and told me, "Do not touch." Appreciate its beauty, not altering it, but protecting it. So my dad never ever yells at me, so when he does, I take it really to heart and I remember it forever. So ever since then, you know, protecting the environment and wildlife and everything like that has been a main priority of mine. So what are single-use plastics? Primarily made of fossil fuel-based chemicals. Think petrols like gasoline for your car. There's some bioplastics that are made from cellulose, starches, and other natural materials, but not many are made. They're meant to be disposed of right after use, within minutes even. Most common for packaging and service, like utensils, bottles, etc. It was invented in the 19th century, And since the 1950s, 8.3 billion metric tons have been produced. In some cases, there are important, some of it is important, like straws for people with disabilities or things like surgical gloves. It's very versatile, lightweight, cheap to make, and easy to use. So why is single-use plastic so bad? It's, for one thing, it's an example of how our society is now just a throwaway society. We prioritize convenience over durability with no consideration given to long-term impact. Our reliance means we are accumulating at a very alarming rate. We are producing 300 million tons a year worldwide, equivalent to the weight of the entire human population. Reducing our use is the most effective means to avoiding this waste. Carrying our own reusable bags, bottles, utensils, etc. are some of the ways to help prevent usage. Recycling single-use plastic reduces its footprint. Recycling polyethylene, most commonly used for water and soda bottles, can be used to make polyester clothing, automotive parts. 91% of single-use plastic, though, is not recycled. Small plastics hard to recycle, like bottle caps, straws, etc., they fall into the crevices in the recycling machinery. So something that I do with the smaller plastics is I put it into a larger bottle or another larger piece of plastic, put the lid on, and then that way I'm recycling all of that. So the breakdown. Plastics don't necessarily break down, they break up. Over time, exposure to sun and heat break them down to tiny pieces known as microplastics. These tiny pieces, the size of 5 millimeters or less, are hard to detect and have been found everywhere. Some household items, such as body washes, they contain microbeads. I know they've been outlawed in some places. Those types of things end up in our water supply. They have been found in the deepest parts of the ocean, in our food supply, and even in us. When eaten by wildlife, such as fish, whales, etc., they can accumulate in their digestive systems, causing the animal to die. Life-threatening blockages, or it could even puncture some of their organs. Microplastics harm our health, our wildlife, and they are also endocrine disruptors. So they can create hormonal imbalances in our bodies and in other animals' bodies. Reproductive issues are infertility or even cancer. DEHP, which is found in shower curtains and garden hoses, for example, has been found to have a probable carcinogen by the US EPA, which is one of the plastics. Of all the plastic ever created, around 80 to 90% of it still exists to this day in landfills. About 9% of it has been recycled, and the rest, which is approximately 12%, has been incinerated. The whole bulk of plastic is moving. Even here in the Midwest, like in Chicago or whatever, you know, we think we're not affecting the oceans. However, with rain, wind, weather patterns, people patterns, any kind of movement patterns, eventually this waste is ending up into our rivers, such as the Mississippi River, which then makes it down to the oceans, such as the Gulf of Mexico. Most of our landfills are older and they're not up to date in maintaining our environments. So although single-use plastic pollution accumulates most visibly on our streets, in fact, our water supply suffers even more. Litter is the first stage of the waste stream, where plastics are found on streets and everywhere, getting blown or washed away by the rain, entering our storm drains and into the rivers and streams, like I already mentioned. Just 10 rivers carry 93% of the world's total amount of plastic that enters the oceans via rivers each year. In 2015, researchers from the University of Georgia estimated between 4.8 million and 12.7 million metric tons of plastic per year make their way to the ocean via people living within 30 miles of the coast. So the majority of this pollution, dominated by single-use plastic waste, comes from countries lacking infrastructure to properly manage the waste, such as India. And a lot of the plastic produced in Asian countries, which is for products that serve US and United States, often sends plastic waste back to these countries for recycling. Even locally, plastic waste enters lakes and streams. And we've already said that, so I'll go on to the next slide. Where do our recycles go right now? China has stopped taking our recycles for about 4 years. Now we're sending these recycles to other countries who also may not have the capacity. So places such as Malaysia, Cambodia, and Vietnam are now taking a lot of our recycles. So we need to upscale our capacity in the USA, but how? Drop a bottle in the ocean and it takes 500 to 1,000 years to break down, but never completely, just being broken down into smaller and smaller pieces. So beach whales have been found with stomachs full of plastics in the guts of 90% of the seabirds, and in the gut of turtles 100%. By 2050, scientists estimate more plastic in the ocean than fish, killing millions of seabirds and mammals each year. Microplastic in fish guts are contaminating the fish on our plates. So I'll be talking more about microplastics shortly. Let's talk a little bit about cigarettes. The chemicals in cigarette butts, the fibers in the cigarette butts are made of plastic. And these are also getting into the fish gills. So there's just a little listing here of the chemicals found in cigarette butts. One of my favorite topics has always been clothing. Our clothing is one major form of both plastic pollution and climate change. Polyester, nylon, acrylic are examples of synthetic fibers that are made from plastic. These materials make up at least 60% of all clothing. When washing our clothes, the fabrics break down in the washer as microplastics entering the water stream. So this is an example of how our plastic here in Chicagoland area are making it to like the Mississippi River. The particles are not filtered out. For us here, the water can eventually, like I said, get to the ocean. There are filters you can buy for your washing machine that can help to block out those microplastics. So studies have estimated that thousands of particles can be dislodged during a single wash. So purchasing organic cotton, hemp, etc. are some of the better ideas of clothing to choose from, or at least if the clothing is made from recycled polyester, anything other than man-made materials, and then therefore keeping these plastics out of the waste stream. So as chairman of the Village of Hoffman Estate Sustainability Commission, last year we put into effect this called simple recycling, which they come and collect our textiles on our garbage day. So we're given special bags, all of the residents, and then we can put our used clothing, men's clothing, there's a listing here, jackets, shoes, purses, hats, pots, pans, sleeping bags, and they will take those items away. Now, these are items that you don't want to necessarily donate for reuse, but like where they're really worn out and unusable anymore. So instead of going into the landfill, this company comes and takes them away for free. And some of these products then can be reused, repurposed to make fiber for carpeting or something like that. So they do sell the materials to be made into other things. So I highly recommend them. On to tiny plastics. So microplastics are 5 millimeters in size, with nanoplastics are a few micrometers in size. 700 species are known to have already ingested. They're in our food or water and air that we breathe. You know, the microplastics are even in our rain, I heard. So research shows that fish that have been fed plastic-synthetic zooplankton move slower, act more confused, and in general have behavioral changes. So I imagine that these tiny plastics may also have effect on human behavior. To date, there's no known studies, but it definitely is interesting that these microplastics being ingested can alter the behavior of the smaller species that we're living with. Plastic manufacturing adds to the greenhouse gas emissions at every step of the way. One of the most greenhouse gas producing sectors in manufacturing, in fact, it is one of the most gas producing sectors in manufacturing. Oil and gas drilling lead to obvious leaking issues contaminating our soils, not to mention the clearing of natural habitat to do so, eliminating carbon sequestering trees. And cracker plants, which break or crack ethane molecules, a component of natural gas, into the chemical building blocks of plastic, are energy intensive and highly polluting. So if plastic production continues unabated, its greenhouse gas emissions could reach 1.34 gigatons per year by 2030. So this is equal to adding nearly 300 new coal-fired power plants, even as the need to curb global climate change becomes more urgent. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have some good news near the end. So avoiding single-use plastics, using the reusable bags, having the reusable bottles with you, cooking more home to avoid any kind of packaging. When you go shopping at grocery stores, really think about the items that you're buying and the packaging they're coming in. Think of how you'll be able to either recycle that, or if it comes in no packaging, even better. Speak out, of course. We always want to speak out on social media or to our friends and family. And then I'll be talking about legislation that's coming up that we can all participate in promoting to our state representatives, governors. And another example is bring garment bag to dry cleaners, for example, if you still use a dry cleaner. One little thing I noticed while we're on the topic of bags, I just learned this just recently that plastic bags if you use the bag 35 times, you make up for its environmental production impact. Paper bags are actually worse. They take 43 times to make up for their environmental production impact. And then these like reusable bags that we're using, you need to use them like 7,000 times for them to make up for their environmental impact. So I know that I've put on here to bring your reusable bag, but in working through this presentation, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should just get a couple single-use plastic bags and then keep reusing those as much as possible because they have almost the lowest environmental impact. So going on to the 2020 Plastic Pollution Platform. So this legislative platform will help Illinois reduce plastic pollution that threatens public health, biodiversity, and our environment. By maximizing recycling and composting while promoting reuse, these bills will significantly reduce solid waste. So if you're watching this, you might want to take a picture of the screen right now so that you can get the bill numbers. So there's at least four platforms here where we're trying to reduce the use of the plastics and increase the use of using recyclable materials or just not using any plastics and such. So we'll be talking more about this stuff, especially through the Sierra Club, once the pandemic is over and we're moving forward. So I'm helping Peter Gore work on that. So if you guys want to find me online, you can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, and my websites. And I'll be answering questions afterwards. And I just wanted to thank you. And I'm done.
Well, thank you, Natalie. All right, I guess just a reminder for everybody that these presentations will be on the website, the League of Women Voters, and at the end, one of the slides will have every presenter's email. So if you have more questions or you want to access information, you'll be able to contact them. So thank you very much. Cindy, we're going to be starting with talking about water pollution, right?
Yep, we are. I'm sharing my screen right now.
Okay.
How's that look?
Yeah.
Looks good.
Looks good.
Great. So I'm really excited for this opportunity to talk to you tonight about pollution solutions to protect our water resources. Again, I'm Cindy Skrukrud. I'm the Clean Water Program Director for the Illinois chapter of the Sierra Club. And I wanted to, hold on, I'm trying to get my slides to go. There we go. So I wanted to start off with my favorite quote, which is from Luna Leopold, who was one of Alda Leopold's children. Truly, water is such a critical resource for all of us. As you probably all recall, we're mostly made of water, and it really is impacted by how we live on the land. So I have a few suggestions for you tonight about what you can do at home to protect our water resources. And so the first thing that I wanted to talk about are some new issues that have arisen during the pandemic. And folks may not realize that we're putting a real strain on our wastewater facilities right now. Wastewater facility workers are essential workers. They are working 24/7, 360 days a year to treat our wastewater. And they're already under strain right now because they're trying to keep their workers well. So some facilities have split their staff into 2 crews. So these crews don't interact with one another. So if one team starts to get sick, they still have a backup team to run the wastewater plant. And so working with they're working with smaller crews than they normally do. And unfortunately, their customers are not helping them out. It's great that folks are doing a lot to keep the surfaces at their home safe during the pandemic, but wastewater treatment plants are really struggling with people flushing items that should not be put in the toilet. So no matter what the packaging says, it says that wipes are flushable, wipes are not flushable. The only things that you should put in your toilet are toilet paper, poo, and pee. And we need to keep our pipes clean, both at home. You don't want to be dealing with a clogged pipe during the pandemic. And we want to prevent clogs in the sewers that take the wastewater to our sewage treatment plants and at the sewage treatment plant itself. This picture was sent to me from folks at the Fox Metro Water Reclamation Plant. That plant serves the greater Aurora area, and you can see that they have a horrible, gross clog in one of their pumps here at the plant. So hashtag wipes clog pipes. Don't put wipes down your toilets. And if you want to learn more about the impacts of the pandemic on our water and wastewater essential services, you can also check out a video at our Sierra Club Facebook page. I've already put that link into the Zoom chat. And with Peter's help, we did an interview with 2 experts from the wastewater and drinking water supply sectors, just talking about the issues I've talked about wastewater, and also how water treatment plants are dealing with the pandemic. And I want to reassure you that our water is safe during the pandemic. But I think you'd find that video interesting, so just look for that link in the chat. So you probably noticed some blue things here in this big old clog at Fox Metro. And unfortunately, people are also flushing gloves down their toilets. So gloves go in the trash. I think that should be pretty obvious to people. What might not be so obvious is another thing that's happening during the pandemic is a lot more people are cooking at home, and restaurants usually have really good strategies for collecting their grease and oils, but people at home are not so conscientious about this. And so this has been causing another thing that's been causing problems with clogs in pipes and at the wastewater plants. So during the pandemic, and actually, every day of the year, remember that you shouldn't be putting cooking grease and oils down your drain. You should have something like, paper towels, a cup, disposal cup or something that you drain your excess oil and grease off into, and then you put that into the trash. And then you should also be wiping off your greasy plates and pans before you wash them in your sink or put them in your dishwasher. And this is going to help out our wastewater facilities, especially now during the pandemic and afterwards too. Okay, so what else is happening this time of year? Yay, it's springtime, and we're all out in our yards doing some gardening. And so there are a few things you can do in your yard all throughout the year that will also protect our water resources. If you have a lawn that you fertilize, there's no need to buy lawn fertilizer that has phosphorus in it. Illinois soils have plenty enough phosphorus already to support healthy turf grass. So you want to purchase a lawn fertilizer that contains no phosphorus. And you can tell that by looking at the fertilizer bag, like the one I've got up on the screen. Those numbers on a fertilizer bag tell you the amount of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in that fertilizer. So you want to look for fertilizer that has a 0 in the middle. That tells you that there is no phosphorus in that fertilizer. And the reason why we're most concerned about phosphorus is it's kind of the limiting nutrient that will cause algae blooms in our waterways if we have a lot of phosphorus running off from our lawns. So since we don't need it for healthy lawns, let's not put it on our lawns. Let's not risk it washing off into our waterways where it causes problems. And in recent years, it's been pretty easy to find no phosphorus lawn fertilizer on the shelves. My second tip here is to think about putting rain gardens at your house downspout. This practice helps hold more water on your property, and it cleans up the quality of the water that does run off. Together, many small gardens can add up to reduce flooding in a community. And these are special gardens where you dig a depression, you plant it with native plants with their deep roots. You can just Google rain gardens and find out a lot of more information about this practice. I did put a link in the chat that takes you to a Wisconsin extension site that has a lot of good information about rain gardens. And then, you know, why stop with the rain garden? Better yet, plant more of your yard with native plants. Because they're adapted to our region, they don't need fertilizer, they don't need water, they have long roots that help them survive droughts, and they also help water soak into the ground. For any of you like me who lives in McHenry County, that's really important too, because we want that water soaking into the ground to replenish our groundwater resources that are our sole supply of drinking water. A native yard, again, also helps reduce community flooding and reduces runoff of water with poor water quality. And it also helps our pollinators who are so in need of native nectar plants. Another thing that I see owners doing this spring is resealing asphalt driveways. So if you're one of those folks with an asphalt driveway, I have an important request for you. Please do not reseal your asphalt driveway with toxic pavement sealant. One common sealant used has as its main ingredient coal tar. And coal tar contains high levels of a group of compounds known as polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons. We call them PAHs for short. They're known human carcinogens, and especially children are at risk from exposure to these chemicals. It's been calculated that someone living next to coal tar sealed pavement has a risk of cancer that is 38 times higher than if they live next to unsealed pavement. And most of that risk comes during the younger years because children are the most likely to ingest coal tar dust. And we also know that runoff high in PAH is toxic to aquatic organisms in our streams and lakes. And that's how I first got involved in working on this issue, was learning about the impacts on aquatic life. But the impacts on humans are equally as important. So if you're a person that needs to seal your driveway, make sure that you tell your applicator that you want them to use a sealant that's low in PAHs. And asphalt-based sealants are another common type of sealant, and they have 1,000 times lower levels of PAHs than coal-based sealants. This next slide shows you how much higher levels of PAHs occur around your home if you use a coal tar-based sealant as opposed to having either unsealed concrete drive, pavers, or using asphalt-based sealant. You can note that there's much higher levels of dust in the home and on the driveways where kids often play. Levels are also higher in the air, especially right after you've sealed with a coal tar-based sealant. There's a lot of off-gassing of these smaller weight volatile PAHs. And if you've been around when they're sealing, you probably have smelled that. And then, as we talked about before, much higher levels of PAHs are also found in runoff from homes using coal tar-based sealants. And the route of contamination of how toxic pavement sealants end up in our waterways and in our homes is pretty simple. The reason why people have to seal their driveways year after year is that as we drive over it and walk and play on it, the sealant wears off. It's the particles of sealant that gets tracked into homes, ends up in the carpet where young children spend a lot of time, and then when it rains, coal tar particles wash off into our waterways, harming aquatic life. And I put a link in the chat to the United States Geologic Service page all about coal tar sealants that contains all the scientific background and studies that have been done on this topic. So again, you can help by not using the sealants on your own property, and you can also help by working with others in your community to stop the use of toxic sealants in your communities. Schools, park districts, municipalities, places of worship can all pledge to not use toxic sealants and to educate others about the problem. The states of Washington, Minnesota, and Maine, as well as the District of Columbia, all have statewide or district-wide bans on toxic pavement sealants. And we've been working at the state level to pass legislation that would help further restrict the use of these toxins, but so far, we've had a pretty strong lobby against us. The league members have been working at the community level to get Illinois towns to ban these products. And I would say that working on this issue from the grassroots has definitely been the more successful approach in Illinois. Evanston, Port Barrington, South Barrington, North Barrington, Vernon Hills, Winnetka, Highland Park, Wilmette, Deerfield, and Glenview now all have bans in place. and folks can remind me if I've left somebody off, a community off the list, but I want to thank the league members for your role in these successes. Okay, this is my last slide, and you can see I turned my water drops into snowflakes. I wanted to talk to you now about a way you can help our waterways during winter months. Another major pollution issue we face in the highly urbanized Chicago region is water pollution from de-icing road salts that we use during the winter months. So minimizing the use of road salts on your property if you use it, and supporting the efforts of your community to engage in sensible salting practices are ways you can help with this water pollution issue. If you use salts at your home to make your sidewalks safe, and that is an important issue that we all need to worry about, please just sweep up the excess salt that's left after a snowstorm, after things melt. You can then keep it and reuse it in the next snowstorm. I'm sure all of you have seen way too much salt on sidewalks and roadways lying around on surfaces when we don't need it, when it's not serving any purpose. It's just gonna, sorry, I'm having a problem with my earbud here, just a second. There we go. It's just gonna wash off into our waterways in the next rain or snow melt. And our local Northwest Cook County Sierra Club group has tested Salt Creek and found that it has high levels of salt. And that's not because it's named Salt Creek, it's because of the runoff that's coming from communities in your area. And so Salt Creek runs from Northwest Cook County down into DuPage County. The DuPage County Salt Creek Work Group is a watershed work group based out of DuPage County, and they have done some analysis and determined that chloride levels in the west and east branches of the DuPage River and in Salt Creek are major stressors on aquatic life. They found that high levels of salt correlate with the loss in biodiversity of fish and other aquatic life in these streams. And the graphic on this slide is from a nice, just a 2-page handout about this topic and the sensible salting movement that is really gotten going here in northeastern Illinois. So I've also put a link to that handout in the chat, so you can grab it and take a look at that. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity to talk about some simple pollution solutions that will help out our waterways, and I'll be happy to answer questions during the Q&A session. I've got my email and phone contact information up on the slide, and I've also already put it into the chat. So thank you for this evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Cindy. Just a little comment that there is a local organization, Citizens for Conservation, that helps put in rain gardens, which they helped me with mine, and I bought my native plants from them, and it's working beautifully in my backyard. So just to kind of move on now, it's a reminder, we're going to get into questions, and if you have a question, you can put it in the chat box, which can be found again on the lower toolbar on your screen. You could also click on the participant icon on the lower toolbar and open the panel on the right of your screen, and it has a raised hand button at the bottom of the screen. And for those that may be dialing in, just press *9
Laura, I think you cut out there.
For the part about putting your questions in.
Oh, yeah, you just came back. If the last thing I heard was *9.
Okay, cool. So we're going to be alternating between questions in the chat and the raised hand. And after you've been called on, you'll be taken off of the mute and you can ask your question. All right. So
Great. Cindy, would you mind stop presenting so that we can all see each other? Thank you. And I think I just want to go, we've already had a couple of great questions in the chat. Cindy, let's start with you. We had a couple of questions from Barb Hill. The first about in reference to the wastewater treatment, are tampons okay to flush down the toilet?
I haven't had that question. So I would say, from the recent information that I've received from wastewater plants, I would say no. But I will check with my folks at Fox Metro on that.
And Barb had another question, if there are any de-icing products that are environmentally friendly or okay to use.
Yeah, so that is, I mean, as I said, there's really this whole sensible salting movement that's going on. And I mean, if you're asking for a homeowner, it's probably harder for you to make use of these new products, but people have maybe heard about these anti-icing products that municipalities use, that they really keep an eye on the weather, and they put down these liquid products that are a combination of salt and things like beet juice, and they put it down before the snowstorm, and so then it makes it so the snow doesn't stick as well to the roads, and they can then use their plows to get the snow off without having to use more salt products. So I would say, you know, those are the types of kind of advances we've had in the last decade or so that really are helping to reduce salt use by municipalities. I'd say at home, you know, use the salt you have, but I think really the whole idea of if it remains after the storm is over, clean it up and save it for the next time.
Thanks. We have a couple more questions for you, Cindy. Terry Gens asked, why is coal used over asphalt when sealing driveways?
Oh, good question. So historically, the sealant that you can buy in the Western United States has been asphalt-based sealant. The coal tar-based sealant has been more available in the Eastern U.S. And the reason is simply that we've had more steel production in the Eastern U.S. Coal tar is simply a waste product of the coking of coal for steel making. And so they found this use for this waste product. And so that's the only reason why we've tended to see it used more in our part of the country. But I'd say, you know, asphalt-based sealant is readily available in our part of the country. You just have to ask applicators to make sure they use it. If you do it yourself, if you go to big box stores, they do not sell coal tar-based sealants. You can only buy the safer asphalt-based sealant there. I can go deep in the weeds on this, so you probably don't want me to do that.
Well, there's another question about driveways. Is there a most environmentally friendly type of driveway? And if you know someone that puts them in, Diane would like to know.
Yeah, I would say probably the most environmentally friendly driveway, and it is probably the most expensive is permeable pavers. So pavers that have the spacing between them so water doesn't run off your driveway, it soaks into the ground. But I could definitely, I'm taking notes, I'm sure I can find a resource for that. Probably you've seen a lot of municipal facilities, park facilities have started putting in more of those types of paving practices.
And the last question that I see in the chat for you, Cindy, and I think this is a good segue to some of our other speakers as well. Renee asked, how can we inform, educate, and press our local elected officials to put in place regulations which are simple and inexpensive that will make a difference in reducing pollution?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've had, the league has had a lot of success, as I described, at the local level, working with local municipalities to put in bans on toxic pavement sealants. That's one thing you can do. I also often think that kind of an incentive program is good. Can a community cost share a bit, help with bulk buys of native plants if folks are going to be planting rain gardens or wanting to convert their yards to native. We have a Sierra Club group in Lake County in our Woods and Wetlands group that has been doing that, kind of sponsoring these bulk buys of native plants. So that might be a easier avenue than essentially requiring people to put in rain gardens, for example.
Thanks, Cindy. I saw a couple of questions in the chat for Natalie Lynn, if you're ready to answer some questions.
Yeah.
Kathy asked, is there any legislation for the packaging of toys and the toys themselves? I think that's about plastic pollution.
No, I mean, specifically we're targeting the type of plastic with the legislation. So I did share those bills, and I can always put them back on my screen if people want to take another screenshot of them and then be able to track them on the governor's, the governmental website. But yeah, first we're really going to try to attack styrofoam. So if you're wanting a certain manufacturer or company to change their packaging, you would have to approach that company individually. And I would say the best way to do that is to start some sort of petition and do some letter writing and gain as much support as you can, and then present it to them, because peer pressure will beat out, because they just want your business. So that would be my way of attacking that issue.
Great. I think that sort of answered Zoe's question. I'll read it so that you can hear it again, but I think that you answered it pretty well. Is there anything we can do to urge the producers of plastic to change their practices to the bio-based plasticware? It seems like a hard feat for the individual consumer to each have each of them change their practices at the store when the stores are already offering these items.
Okay, so those bioplastics are actually not recyclable in our normal recycling system, because the normal recycling system is for the coal-based and not the plant-based or bio-based. So, and then also those bio-based plastics I do not like, because a lot of it is made from corn, ethanol, and that's just adding to our agriculture problem, which is a big producer of greenhouse gases. So I think the biggest way to attack our plastic pollution, the solution is to just not use it at all, and then to get rid of it as much as we can. So actually, plastic recycling was produced by the plastic producers in order to create more of a market for their plastics. So if anybody wants to watch the movie called Plastic Wars, yeah, Plastic Wars documentary, I highly recommend that. And it just came out recently, and it's free. And it talks about how the whole plastic recycling was created and marketed so that we would just keep using more and more plastic. So it does go into some solutions too near the end.
Great, thank you. And then I saw one question for Jennifer and Renee. Barb asked, that she says that she composts. Is there any way to return that soil to a farmer? It seems like that's the best way or the only way to close the loop.
So that's a great question. Jennifer, feel free to chime in if you'd like. I think that one of the kindest things you can do is find a way to share it with other gardeners right in your neighborhood. And also, there are lots of farmers around this area that offer CSA programs, so you could check with those farms, Middlebury Farms, Angelic Organics, et cetera. Smart Farm may be willing to accept compost as well, but I would think you'd have lots of people willing to take your nutrient-rich compost and apply it to their plants and gardens right in your own neighborhood.
There's another question about a specific composting site in Wakanda, and if they allow people to take composting. Do you know about that?
If they allow people to pick up compost from their site?
Yeah, I assume so.
Okay.
Jackie and McGrath, if you have a follow-up on that, feel free to just type that in the chat.
Okay, I'm assuming it's in regards to Midwest Organics, which is located in Wakanda, and they do bag their finished compost right there on site, and it's available through several garden centers nearby. Their website is Compost Matters, and I would check there to see where they distribute it. I think they generally reserve pickups at their composting site for larger commercial pickups.
Thank you. And Jackie and McGrath also had another question. I think it's for Natalie. They said, Natalie said there was a filter for microfibers that could be put in a washing machine. Was that right? If so, where can they be purchased? What's the cost?
Yeah, I personally don't have one. I need to buy one. So I would just go on to Amazon, or you could probably just Google it. And I don't believe they're that expensive. Probably maybe, I'm just guessing, like $30. But yeah, just Google it or Amazon and it'll come right up. You can just say filter for your washing machine from microplastics, and they're all available.
Great. And I think this next question is also probably good for you, Natalie. Do you have any comment on stores not allowing us to bring our reusable bags in during the pandemic?
Okay, which ones? Oh, Whole Foods, right? You know what? I am bringing my reusable bag in, and I've been using that to put all my groceries in, and then I take that to the automated checkout counter and just putting my groceries right back in there, and nobody's saying anything to me, so that way I'm not touching anything. And yeah, that's my thought on that.
Yeah, I also heard someone say that they put all of their groceries back in the cart after that they checked out, and then they had a vehicle, so they brought it to their car and then bagged it in their car with their own reusables.
Yeah, exactly.
There's another question about ways to compost if you live in a multi-dwelling building. I heard a little bit about vermiculture during the presentation, but are there any follow-ups to that?
I would definitely say vermicomposting in that situation, or to find a drop-off site, possibly, depending on where you live. Like Prairie Land is the one close to us that people who can't compost for various reasons, they can just go and drop off their food waste for free. So that would be an option as well.
And the next question is, what were the names of the 3 chefs and their websites for cooking with zero waste?
Thank you. Yes. So Allison Mountford, her site is Ends and Stems, and she offers a menu planning service as well. Joel Gamorin, and he has a great cookbook called Cooking Scrappy. And then Anne-Marie Bonneau, the Zero Waste Chef. And all 3 have websites and are really active on social media and share great tips there on a regular basis as well. I'll type those into chat right now if that's helpful.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you so much. I
And
don't.
just to tack on a quick comment, Peter, also that I thought might be relevant to what Natalie was discussing, completely agree with her that bioplastics are problematic. They're neither recyclable, and in Illinois' climate, they're also not compostable. So certainly the best thing is to just avoid their use altogether.
Thanks. I do not see any other questions in the chat, and I don't see any raised hands. I'm going to give it maybe 30 seconds or so that people, if you're in the middle of typing, finish up and press enter. And if there's no more questions, Laura, I'll hand it back to you to wrap us up.
All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you to all of our presenters for your time and sharing your great knowledge and ideas. And I must say that I do take my own bag into the grocery store, put my groceries in it, do check out, and carry it out with my bag, and nobody has a problem. So it does work. So if you do want more information, please send your questions to the presenter's email or the League of Women Voters Palatine Area at gmail.com. And just a last note, I mean, our presenters have got so much information, but I thank all of you for being on this call. I mean, here you are watching and listening to a Zoom meeting, and so you already care. And we all can do more to decrease waste and use our resources wisely. So a couple of other tips. Perhaps eat less meat, even once or twice a week. Go without meat and you'll probably even feel a little better. And when you buy products, make sure that that packaging is made out of recycled product. There's something I just got recently about if you're ordering out, which a lot of us are doing more takeouts, a couple of tips. When you order your takeout, ask for no napkins, ask for no plates, ask for no plasticware or even condiments, because we probably all have that at home. And then it's always important, and as a League of Women voter, I can't resist saying it, we have to vote. And we have to let our legislators know what's important to us. And when they do the right thing, let's thank them. So thank you, everybody, and stay safe. Thanks.